Good evening and welcome to the June Dirigo Speaker Series. It is summer now. A lot of the springtime work is over, and we thought it would be a great time to invite the Executive Director of Startup Maine, Ms. Sarah Smith, to talk about the Maine Startup Week, take a look back, what she's been learning and growing in this position. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
So, you're fairly new to the position.
Yes.
As of when was it? November?
October.
October.
Yep.
And then right into the planning for pretty much.
Pretty much, yep.
I wanted to start off by first getting to know you a little bit and getting to know the organization. Some people may not be familiar. So can you start off by telling us a little bit about Startup Maine and then your path to getting to become the executive director?
Yeah, absolutely. So Startup Maine is a nonprofit that exists to convene and champion the startup ecosystem in Maine. We have been around since 2018 and started as a volunteer-run organization under Katie Shorey and many others, and our flagship event has always been Startup Maine Week, which we had in May. We would have a series of happy hours and other programming, and as Startup Maine grew and more people were coming to Maine and more companies were being started, Startup Maine board felt like there's this opportunity to continue our mission of how do we convene all the resources we do have, because we have more than you would expect for the amount of startups in Maine, honestly, and how do we elevate what's happening in our ecosystem and have more companies start, scale, and grow here. And luckily, there was the Innovation Ecosystem Development Grant that Maine Technology Institute had, and it was that opportunity that allowed Startup Maine to hire a full-time executive director. I was on the board for 2 years prior to us looking at this grant, deciding we were going to scale, and through conversations with Katie Shorey and the board and my own reflections, it was the right opportunity for me and the right fit for the organization. I've been in Maine almost 4 years now and have a deep background in startup ecosystem, innovation consulting, all those buzzwords, but essentially community building when it comes to startups, and have been looking for an opportunity in Maine to do that work, so it felt like a great thing.
Yeah. Tell us about that background. You were working with scaling fintech companies in one part of your past in Charlotte?
Yes, correct. So I started my career as a Venture for America fellow. Venture for America is like Teach for America, but for young student or post-grad students to go work at startups in cities that need entrepreneurship. It no longer exists as VFA. They hit an interesting challenge during the pandemic because a lot of the value we got was moving to these cities and meeting each other in a cohort, but it now exists as the Ember Fellowship. So if anyone you know is graduating college and wants to go into startups, it exists, and it's great. And so I did Venture for America, and I landed in Charlotte because it was one of the cities that VFA was part of, and started one at a company that was an online proctoring tool that said it was automated, and it actually was not. It was very funny. The product did not work at all. We had like 30 support staff, and you never know what's going to happen. They survived because the pandemic happened, and they figured out their technology. But when I was there, founder leaves, many people leave, so within 6 months I had like a quick crash course of like companies fail all the time, and was lucky enough to know someone else in my cohort who was working at a fintech accelerator, so fintech being financial technology. Charlotte is a massive banking hub, which I didn't realize until I moved there, but it's where Bank of America is headquartered, Wells Fargo has a big presence, and so I then ran for about 2 years a fintech accelerator. So we had companies coming in from all over the world, would be in Charlotte for 12 weeks. The banks were all sponsors, so they would engage with them. And Charlotte as a city made a play to become an innovation hub through fintech. So I got to be a part of that growth for Charlotte, where it's like so different now whenever I go back to visit, where there's so much more housing and startups and corporations. And because we then had companies like Honeywell and Lowe's decide to open digital centers in Charlotte as well, but it started with the banks making the play, so that was my first foray into what is ecosystem building.
That's an interesting process of building a startup ecosystem around the existing strengths in the economy, and then it can expand out from there.
Yep.
Yeah. So what got you interested in starting ecosystems for startups, and how have you not gotten pulled into another startup on your own? I feel like you have to fend them off.
No, it's a good question. I am someone who loves scaling. I'm not necessarily the person who's going to start something. I deeply admire those people who are, and I love giving my thoughts to them, even though I haven't done it myself. But once something is kind of half-baked and you have some sort of proof of concept, taking that and building it. And then I'm very driven by partnerships and those just touch points in the community. So that's what it ended up attracting to me to staying in Charlotte even after I graduated VFA. I loved that I was able to work with the city's economic development and corporates and startups and start figuring out how do we solve some problems in the community. And to me, that's ecosystem building at its finest. And I love doing a variety of things, which sometimes can be absolutely too much, but I think ecosystem building allows that, where I can have a breadth of working with different companies and looking at different problems versus just going in on one. But I always say if like someone I trust has an idea and they're the visionary, I'm more of the execution person. So maybe one day I'll start a company. We'll see. Not yet.
That's a great skill to have, because a lot of people, I remember somebody had told me once, you can be somebody who starts the ideas or executes the ideas, but you can't just come up with lots of ideas and let them go
Yes.
south. Yeah.
Yes.
So Startup Maine Week is the flagship annual event.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take us a little, I love operations and
Yeah.
seeing how people process things and design for success. And by all the feedback that I heard, it was a giant success. And being there, everything went so smoothly. People were organized. Nobody on the staff seemed stressed. Things happened on time. Can you start us back when the planning began and through some of the operations to put together this large of an event?
Yeah. Oh man, so many details. Luckily, Startup Maine Week has been in existence for a bit. So I had some institutional knowledge from Katie Shorey, who's still on the board, of how it had run previously. So I had documents to refer back to. But what we wanted to do this year was different. It was going to be scale it, professionalize it. It had to feel different from last year because we have a full-time person now and we have a bit more funding, and we also want our community to feel like we're taking a step forward and bringing in different voices, different ideas. So the planning, I believe, started in like December or January. It kind of all is blurring in my head, so it's going to be good when I go back through all my documents and then create the timeline for next year. And it really started with what is the information, the content, the feeling you're trying to get out. And from the start of my job in October, I try and prioritize time with startup founders as much as possible. So just talking to them about what they're building, what their challenges are, what they see as opportunities in Maine, how Startup Maine can better serve them. I have after my FinTech Accelerator, I was a human-centered design facilitator, so we were just talking about customer discovery a bit. I take that approach now to most things of like, who's my actual stakeholder or end user? And for Startup Maine, it is the startup, it is the founder, their employees. So I spent a while asking, what do you want to hear? Who do you want to hear from? And people like Tori from Highlight, who's incredible. We could stick her on any panel. She's going to be great. But I was like, Tori, what do you actually want to talk about? And, she was like, this isn't sexy, but like operations. And like, I sat in for half of their panel and I was like, this was helpful for me. So like, thank you for doing this. So it was really that. And then we put out a call for submissions. And so it was a combination of that. And then things I knew from taking on the role and previous experiences that I also wanted to put in content-wise. So stuff like, how do startups and corporates work together more? We don't have enough of that in Maine. We all know that's a challenge. So how can we create at least a discussion and a dialogue of startups should be looking at these corporates, at these larger companies as potential customers. We also need our bigger companies to look at the startups as vendors. So it's all of that, and then that's the content piece. There's also the logistics piece. So that's finding venues. We put out a call for event planners. So luckily I had two really phenomenal event planners that we worked with. Seaglass Sally Newell, and then SRS events, Sarah Scheider. Highly recommend if people need event planners. They're both great. They were super helpful in terms of project management, of figuring out vendors and just all of that nitty gritty detail. So we would meet once a week. And then University of Maine, Maine Center, and the Brew are both sponsors of Startup Maine and also were hosts for the conference. So that was how that shaped out. And we received feedback from the previous year that it was chaotic to go from one place to another. I also personally was like, I'm not running across the peninsula in the middle of the day.
Right.
So just how do we streamline a bit of those operations? And once some of that was built, it was then how do we start marketing it? How do we tease it? And we do early bird tickets first to drive some value there. We played with the Startup 5-pack. How do we create discounts for a cohort or for a company to bring their employees? And then we announced the agenda and we did a lot of tweaking along the way. There's, I think we had maybe 3 or 4 panels shift to like that week just because people get sick or something happens, and just deal with that. And then I think to your point of everything needs to feel seamless, that was our goal during the week. Of there might have been a fire behind the scenes, but something also from a previous job I had of facilitating huge workshops for executives, it's like always just seem fine. You can like deal with it later because people are going to react to your energy. And luckily for us, there was so much excitement from people, we could feed off of that if something was feeling off to us. So yeah, hopefully that was a good overview of the operations.
Yeah, well, the feeling, my first day there, it was like a homecoming. It's like I haven't seen these people in a long time.
Yeah.
You get to catch up on how everybody's doing, or somebody's introducing you to the next person. There's a real sense of comity and around facilitating networks and conversations. Yeah, the networking time was really helpful too. Was there anything that you wanted to put into the programming this year that you weren't able to for some reason? Or something that you took out that maybe will go back in next year?
Yeah, it's a good question. I definitely had like very high ambitions for certain things, but then it was like, okay, that's probably not going to happen this year. We had a vision at some point of how do we actually create this is the Startup Maine Best of Startup Showcase, and we were like, what if we do it at Ocean Gateway? And we like really like work with all of our partners and say, what is the absolute, like, if you're coming into Maine, like, what is the company you have to know? So we talked about a bit that as the board, realized it was just too much to bite off for this year, but things like that of just how can we continue to showcase and elevate what we have here and create different opportunities for startups to be on stage. I also think I would have loved a bit more workshops and interactions, but it's hard to squeeze it all in.
Yeah. Can go always for next time.
Yep.
Besides attendance numbers and people staying all the way to the end, or the number of t-shirts purchased, or how do you measure success going backward now and understanding what feedback you're getting and how the numbers turned out?
Yeah, so some of it is definitely quantitative. So like in our feedback survey, it is like an NPS score. It is saying how would you rate this, and that is good to see. And also things like, were you there for the first time? So in that survey, we saw at least 50% were at Startup Maine Week for the first time. So it means we're reaching new people. So one of our goals as a board is to grow Startup Maine Week, and growth can take shape in many different ways. Another thing I mentioned, I don't know if it was when we started talking or it was before we started the actual event, was just having the conference feel professionalized and a bit more elevated in the sense that we want our ecosystem to start competing and showcasing on a national level. So having people say this felt professional and felt seamless, because the conference was always great. Like, it was always high energy, but it was incredibly DIY'd together, which huge kudos to Katie. I do not know how she did it as she did it, but we were like, okay, we have the funding, we have a bit of staff, how do we make it feel different? How do we create an app? How do we do X, Y, Z? As well as how do we provide content that is different from what we have done? We're a small enough community where you might start seeing the same speakers. Those are great speakers. How can we bring in other people to share their stories? And people like JT White from Forerunner, who's been quietly building a really successful Series B company here, I didn't know about him until like 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think a lot of people knew he was here, even though like he did start at the Rue. So how can we get companies like that to share their experience more? And even Revision Energy, like I asked Phil Coop to speak, and he's like, we've just never been asked before. And I was like, okay, we got to do that. So for me, success, it was going to be, did we push the envelope a bit? Did we create new dialogue, new connections? And I believe we did that.
That proactive work really paid off, I think, because first time I looked at the program, I was like, I don't know most of these. A lot of
that's
these
the
people
goal.
aren't even from the state. And
Yeah.
making the effort to go bring people to the state to get to see companies, but also to exchange ideas, because sometimes you can bump into the same, 20 people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If you were running it again tomorrow, is there anything you'd change?
I would start everything sooner.
Everything's
I think I started in October. We announced this new phase of me as the executive director in January. So the first 3 months was me just trying to understand what the role was going to be and get ready for that. And then immediately go into conference, and it felt like I was always 10 steps behind. So I'm happy it went well, but I would start everything sooner.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah, I think we all in startup world feel like that. It's always you're trying to do everything at once. So
Design for success.
yeah.
Reduce the opportunities for failure. So are there other events coming out from Startup Maine throughout the year? I know you have a variety of partnerships. What else do you have on the docket?
Yeah, we have a good amount that's going to be coming out soon. Our closing keynote, Clarence Bethia, is working on coming here in August. So hopefully we'll be announcing this soon, but he'll come to do a 5-hour workshop with early stage startups to refine their pitch and help them fundraise. So we're hoping to do that in August with them and at the Rue. And that will be exciting because he was just, I think, a perfect close to the week, and a lot of founders reached out to him after to continue to talk to him and just get his feedback. So he's doing a 5-city tour, and it's like, I'm going to come back to Maine, even though he'd never been here before he came. So that's one that is going to be coming up. We're also partnering with Corsair, so Chris Wolfel and his venture firm. They're doing a startup happy hour in July, so we'll be pushing that out soon. We'll partner as well with the Maine Center. So they had last March an entrepreneurial ecosystem summit where they were bringing together service providers of how do we better shape the future of the startup ecosystem. And we did a bit of a sprint on Tuesday of Startup Maine Week to help build into that. So we're working with them right now to figure out what's the date with that. Probably going to be November, December. And then we'll do a lot of just promoting other events going on. So Launchpad, their kickoff with Nexus.
So these are all other events trying to just keep the momentum going, make new opportunities for the ecosystem to interact and kind of serve the problems or address the issues that people are talking about.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. We have our Dirigo launch coming up in our incubator in the fall. And so we'll definitely be joining some of these events to help recruit people for this next
and
cohort.
we'll come up to your event too.
It'd be great. We'll put something together. We'll have, we can talk offline about it, some of the stuff coming up. So you have the MTI matching grant that let Startup Maine go from volunteer run to staff with that new capacity. Is that something that's going to keep you at this level of capacity for multiple years?
So the grant itself wraps up the project in 2027. So the goal I have as an executive director is to create enough of a sustainable financial model that we can go beyond those few years. So one of my jobs is to start fundraising or continue fundraising really and be able to eventually hire staff, because if we're going to scale with the ecosystem, it can't just be me. So even now I'm like, okay, I have a big gap around just like marketing, social, community events, because that's a whole skill set that I can do, but I also need to be doing strategy and fundraising and talking to founders. So we, as Startup Maine, as a nonprofit, we have donations, we have sponsorships, and then we are also figuring out where can we have recurring revenue as well.
And who are your donors typically? Are they banks or organizations in the state at that level? Or?
Yep, they are banks, so like M&T Bank is one of our sponsors. There are also national companies like TriNet. So they were a new one for us this year, which is great. and then the Rue, University of Maine, Maine Center, Bernstein Schroer. So a lot of companies and organizations that want to provide services or support startups in some way and care about the economic growth of Maine.
Fantastic. And if somebody wants to chip in some money, they would just reach out to you?
Yes, they can go to Startup Maine website, startupmaine.org, and there is impact and a donate button. So if they are an individual, there's always that option. If they're interested in sponsorships, then absolutely can reach out to me. We have various tiers and levels of that.
Excellent. You've talked about working through Startup Maine on elevating Maine founders nationally throughout New England. And that sometimes comes down to storytelling and an effort from the founders, but it really helps when the ecosystem helps boost them because they're already busy.
Yep.
What are ways that the ecosystem itself or founders can help raise their visibility, maybe through better storytelling or getting out of the state? Or
I think there's so many ways to do it, and we're still trying to figure it out too, and I think it is a collaborative effort. So one, I think digital presence is quite important. So how are you promoting yourself and your story on LinkedIn? I think we in the startup ecosystem in Maine aren't doing enough with video. So it's great to have this like live stream and this recorded. So how can we provide clips and little pieces to send out to people? Because you need to be able to share your story to some people in like 60 seconds. So how can we create that? So we had a partner, Melt Media, be at the conference, and they interviewed a lot of founders one day.
Oh.
And so we're going to have a bunch of clips soon that we're going to be able to circulate and push out and also give to our founders and say, here's you talking about your company. So that stuff can travel fast and far. So how can we do that? And then when there's opportunities at other conferences and events that we're already tied to that make sense for a founder, Startup Maine wants to be a better connector on that because the founder's not going to have as much time to figure out the right conferences to always go to. So how can we have a pulse on what's happening in Boston or Connecticut or New York, or, you know, we work with the Canadian consulate. What's going on up there that would make sense for some of our companies to go to? So it's a mix of things, and I think there's also strong storytelling that's starting to grow here. So like Chris Philbrook at Maine Startup Insiders is doing a great job interviewing founders and sharing stories on his newsletter. And so we want to continue talking with Chris of like, how can we take your strong ability as a storyteller and a reporter and elevate that in Maine Biz? How do we circulate that? So it's like we have the puzzle pieces. It's just getting a bit more creative and collaborating with everyone to say these are the points we want to be sharing.
Yeah. Good. Steve Getz here, Soba Sparkles, great marketing. Maine Crisps and now
There you go.
Sparkling. Capital Talent and Game Beyond Cumberland County all came up during the week. We're up here in central Maine, and we try and connect between Bangor and the post-secondary schools in central Maine and Portland, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how the ecosystem can spread out into the rurality of Maine while not being too distant?
I think it's so hard. I remember reading that question being like, of these, what is the biggest challenge? I was like, kind of all of them are a big challenge in Maine. I think one of the ways that Startup Maine and me as the executive director can be better at it is you all holding me accountable to, and Startup Maine accountable of, hey, we have this event, like this is the time to be here. So I was talking with Brandon at NMDC before the conference, and I was like, when is the right time to come up? And he's like, probably like once every 3 years, but honestly, if you just come up once every 3 years, that's more than most people. So I'm like, that's achievable, but because it's hard with the amount of information out there, I need people to also tell me when it makes sense, and also knowing when and where we can be helpful. So talking to the NMDCs and the sunrises of, okay, what is going on in your community? What is really innovative right now? Like, where are your challenges and where are the companies you see that are true startups? Because I think that's a tension point we have in Maine is, what is a startup? Is it a small business or is it a potentially high growth company? Startup Maine is focused on tech, tech-enabled, disruptive companies with the ambition and ability to scale. So that's not always going to be Main Street or lifestyle businesses. Those still matter, but like when you are in the county and you have a startup that is looking to connect outside of Maine to customers, conferences, etc., I want them to come to Startup Maine so we can help as well. So I don't know how to solve it, but that's how I'm starting to at least approach understanding the challenge we have. And I hope that Startup Maine and, Dirigo and all of the partners, we can just do a better job as time goes on coordinating our events and our communications, because it's like we all talk, but we still overlap in not the best ways sometimes with even our events. It's like, we'll get this down eventually.
Yeah. And some of our events, we find out, they're on the exact same night or something.
Yeah.
That happened a couple times.
The calendar is always the hardest thing.
Yeah. Looking back at some of the founders you've been talking to, over the last few years with Startup Maine, are there any themes or trends that you're seeing, whether it's the adoption of AI, growing blue tech or advancing blue tech industry, forestry or whatnot? Are there any themes that stick out to you?
I definitely think it's easier than ever to start something. Like we were talking about this earlier, with the tools you have at your disposal, you can build a prototype or a landing page in a few hours. So then where are the challenges that come after that? Like you can have a proof of concept. So then it is the challenge of, are you talking to customers? Do you actually have the market fit? But I think now people really can build from anywhere. So you have more people like me who came here 4 years ago because we want to live somewhere like Maine. We see the value in the people, the community, the nature here. We're going to build here. The challenge then that I see happening is sometimes founders need, I think, the resources we have in Maine, the decisions we're making in Maine to move at the speed of startups. That's what I'm hearing a lot from founders, is sometimes if they are working with an entity or a resource that has been here for a long time, they're moving at not the speed startups need for just answers and feedback. So that's something that's like a trend I've been hearing a little bit. So for example, we have so many resources that are helpful. We had an investor say they were trying to get their certificate of good business standing from the state, and the state was like, to Augusta. In a lot of other states, you can get it digitally the same day. So things like that are going to become barriers to building companies here if we don't start to fix that a little bit. So I took a trend and kind of then went a little bit of a challenge we have. But other trends are the heritage industries. Like we have this differentiation and this historical knowledge and this base for forestry, for ocean. So I see that. And then life sciences, MTI making the investment in the state, making the investment to open a life sciences center. And I was also talking with Barry Work from Ovation.io, and he pointed out that they have a genomics company that I'm not a health tech person, so I'm not going to be able to perfectly explain it, but he was saying, in some ways, we have the Goldilocks situation in Maine. We have one huge healthcare provider that basically is your healthcare provider option. They're going to have to innovate and change, so they're going to need to work with startups. They're going to need to pilot solutions in rural communities. So, I don't know if anyone has read, I'm a little bit of an AI nerd, but the state put out an AI task force report maybe 6 months ago, and a lot of it, I think, it's hard to be current with something like an AI task force report, but the opportunity that they pointed out that I thought is really valid is we could solve our own challenge when it comes to rural healthcare with innovation, with AI, with other things. So I think that's a lane that we could be going down, but I don't think we have a clear identity yet.
It's a fantastic point. We have I think the oldest state in the country.
Yes.
And a lot of older people in rural areas, and whether it's telehealth or just robots in your living room, there are a lot of opportunities for testing. That next level. That's a great point. What's your advice for, I've started a company and I'm not connected with anybody in the community yet. I know I probably should be, or I want to start getting out and finding partners to work with. What's the best way to do it? If I'm maybe a student or maybe somebody who just moved here with an idea.
Yeah, I think one, I hope people come to Startup Maine and reach out to us on our website. I'll always hop on a call with someone for 30 minutes to hear what they're building, how they're trying to get connected. And then the plethora of newsletters there's really good curated events from Startup Maine, from Nexus. I do think society is shifting more to in-person again, and that's great. So going to events like Startup Maine Week or your launch or, anything the Brew is hosting, that's going to be a great place to meet people and just get to understand who is in the community. And it doesn't hurt to do cold outreach too sometimes. Like, people are going to be helpful. I moved here and I didn't know anyone. So I had to just go to events and start talking to people and ask people if I could, pick their brain. And I think also if you're starting something or you are looking for advice, people love talking about themselves. So like, if you are just going about it through an informational interview and you're like, I'll buy you a coffee, people are usually going to say yes. So I think that's a great way to get started. Just start plugging in. You don't have to go to every single event, but like, what's one organization that's most aligned to what you're interested in, and start going to those.
It's great advice, and I think because the friction for starting something is getting less and less, we're going to have more and more people joining the community. So it's great to have a strong center point for the ecosystem in Maine. Would you want to plug who is a Maine founder or builder more people should know about?
Oh, it's such a good question. I feel like she gets shouted out a lot, but she deserves it. Alexa McGovern at Dirigo Sea Farm. She's just like a brilliant person and very hard worker. And I think I find founders the most interesting when I'm like, even if this doesn't work, you are going to have a huge success. And I think Dirigo Sea Farm can definitely work, but she's one of those people where I would invest in her as a founder. I think she's going to solve problems. I saw her at Startup Maine Week, and she was like, kind of realized I started building another company that was like analyzing the cancer I had, and then I realized I was starting another company, so I had to stop. It's like, yeah, you do have one other startup that is like, you're also trying to scale that. So she's a great one. And then kind of on the reverse side, more in the small business world, I have two friends who started a mobile sauna business. And the way they're going about that, it's called Village Sauna, is just really cool because it's quite community driven. It's like reflective of the Hearts of Pine model. So I also admire what they're doing, trying to figure out what is the right way to provide a service to people and navigate the ins and outs of municipalities, which has been quite hard. So,
well, it's a great time to be living in Maine and starting things in Maine.
Yep.
So we've got such a variety of companies popping up and growing fast, developing really quickly.
Correct.
Is there a piece of advice you've ever received from a leader that sticks out to you you'd want to share?
I looked at this question, I tried to think about it, and I was like, what is it?
I'll put it in the context of Dirigo Labs, our accelerator has 3 different phases, and in the last one, Dirigo Raise, we work on raising funds, but also raising the leadership of the individual founders. Helping find what your leadership skills are and the way you want to run your company that's close to your values and mission. So we're trying to build good founders as well.
I love that. I think it's so little, but like taking a breath or a few steps before responding to something that is challenging. I am like a recovering consultant, so I would often be in tough Zoom situations where it's just like I kind of want to explode, and I'm a Southern New Englander at heart, so I'm like very direct and a little New Yorkie in that way. And as a leader, I had my manager at some point be like, take 2 to 3 seconds, and that silence is going to be more powerful than you digging into like a point that you disagree with or the silence that's there. And that has been helpful for me, especially when we were talking about the conference, of just like, okay, something's going on, just take a few seconds, take a beat, because I know my instinct is always to react really fast. So for me, knowing that sometimes the superpower of like being a fast reactor can also be at my detriment, like thinking about that. So for me, it's like taking a few breaths before responding.
Good point. Is there anything else we should cover or want to talk about for events this summer? that anybody should get involved with?
Yep. We will have, I mentioned the Coursera one. That will be coming online soon, and I believe it's July 15th. I could be wrong on that exact date. We partner with Maine Community Bank. They're one of our sponsors, and they have Launchpad, which is their grant competition. They are going to have a $75,000 grant for companies this year. They do a big kickoff with Nexus at the Roo. I believe that's also in July. So I'd flag that one for people. That will be down at the Roo. And then more to come for August.
Yeah. And get out to those pitch events and competitions and support your local startups when they're raising money. Any questions from anyone here or from at home?
Yes.
Sure.
One of the things that always stands out to me about the Startup Maine Week is that you have a lot of different people in the room.
Yep.
Like you have people who are just starting out and barely have an idea. You have people who have raised quite a bit. You have investors, you have support organizations, you have people who have been in Maine their whole life, you have people who are new to Maine coming to something for the first time. How do you approach programming for all of that?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's one of the big philosophical questions my board will be discussing soon of, how big is the big tent? For us this year, it was thinking about it through 3 tracks. We didn't necessarily say this is track 1, 2, 3, but the starting phase, so trying to make sure we had content that was early stage, thinking around your first hire, your first raise, all that, and then scaling. I felt like Startup Maine Week never had that scale content, just because we are a younger ecosystem. So ensuring that we had things like what does it take to raise Series A and B, having JT White speak on the first day, having that as well, and then allowing for the organic moments of connection and having group pitch fests and all of that. We're never going to have the perfect content for everyone, so it's also just being okay with that, which is a challenge. But hearing from people after the fact what's really missing, because not everything has to be during Startup Maine Week. We can have something else if we're like, oh, we didn't hit that, but there's like 50 founders that want to talk about this. That's how we were thinking about it.
What are some common mistakes that you see entrepreneurs make when trying to scale? And how do you know when it's time to invest in growth or to kind of just focus on your core business and where you're at before doing that?
Good question. So I think sometimes companies can scale before they have the product market fit, and just putting something into the market without the validation that there are customers or that there is truly a problem that people want to pay money to solve. So I think ensuring that you have that fit is really important. And then also so I spend a lot of time with B2B startups for the most part, of ensuring you have those first few customers that can share that case study. When I was working for an AI accelerator at Comcast out in Philadelphia, we wouldn't take a company in the accelerator if they didn't have another enterprise client. But you need that first one. So I do think it's important to focus on getting the first customer and also ensuring that customer hopefully doesn't leave if they're the right one. Not every customer is going to be perfect. So I think sometimes people brush past that to what we were talking about earlier. With tools, sometimes people aren't out talking to the customer and spending as much time with them. So that was a scaling. And then your second question was around when it's time to scale and invest. I think scale can mean different things to different people. So it depends on what you mean by scale, whether it's hiring, whether it's fundraising. But I think it's looking at your runway, your cash flow, looking at those hard numbers. Then if you're thinking about scaling in the sense of hiring, do you have the right runway to be hiring someone? Are they filling a role that's going to still be there in 6 months in terms of your need at your company? So I'm happy to talk to you more about exacts, but it depends a little bit on what you're talking about with scale.
Thank you. I just have a second question. What are some resources or opportunities that you think are underutilized by businesses in our state?
Oh, yeah. Probably a lot of them because we have so much that it's hard to navigate. I would say probably startups don't always know about the seed tax capital credit and that investors can be using that as a little bit of a write-off. So that makes it more attractive to invest in companies here. I think people don't know, for example, like organizations like Fame, they do grants and loans as well. A lot of our orgs just offer so much that it's hard to understand that. I'm curious what you think.
I am routinely surprised when startups don't have a team of advisors.
Yeah.
Of just free advisors that you want to be able to call them up and pick their brain because you've selected them because you admire something they've done or they've done what you're trying to do. And mostly those people will just love to offer their advice. And it's free advice.
That's so true.
Well, I'm glad that you actually mentioned something about AI. And I wanted to piggyback on what you just said. Since AI is so prevalent right now, when do you guys feel like the separation between using AI as the tool to help, whether it be for marketing, mining for customers, or trying to search for that specific data point that you're looking for, that's a hot button for your customers, and then deciding, okay, I need to go to the customer and have these conversations with those people instead of trying to figure it out through AI.
Ooh. I think, I think with something like customer data and challenges, like AI can be really powerful for analyzing it and finding themes, and so you can potentially flag problems sooner. But I think like it's always important to go to the customer. AI can give you like the base, like I don't believe in ever going into a meeting without looking up someone's LinkedIn, so I at least have some context on who they are. So AI can kind of be that for you. Like I use Gemini now before I go into a meeting, being like, what is this person? How do they relate to Startup Maine? But you should always be asking the customer what really is the challenge, and maybe AI can help you start to solution a little bit, and you can be prepared for it. But it shouldn't replace that conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. What I found in our last cohort, a couple companies that had really complicated solutions, they were going to be super important to a small group of enterprise companies, using AI to find who is the exact person or 2 or 3 people in each business that I might have be my first customers that I should be making contact with. Is it the CEO? Is it a VP? Is it somebody here? And why? And then go test it. Try and start a conversation with those people and see if that process is working. Because maybe you would have otherwise had 50 conversations to figure out that you should be talking to the VP of Sales and Development at this corner of the office. Yeah.
It's a really great point. Good question.
Well, thank you very much.